Okay, yesterday we were downstairs, so we're learning about the rules of bracha rishena, the rules of a bracha. We discussed that if you don't make a bracha before you eat, so then your me'il behekdesh, it's like you misuse holy things that a person has to bring a carbon plus an additional fifth. Another place it says that if you don't make a bracha before you eat, you're stealing. Because before you make a bracha belongs to Hashem. When you make a bracha, Hashem gives it to you. So therefore, if you eat without making a bracha, so you end up stealing from Hashem. Also, we learned that b'diavad, even though b'diavad, if you make a shahakol and anything, it's good enough. But nevertheless, you have to learn the proper bracha for each particular thing, and make sure you have the right bracha instead of just making shahakol for everything. By the way, just one thing, we're going to learn more about that. Shahakol is good for all things. Bar nefashis is not an after bracha that's good for everything. Now, if somebody ate cake, that they have to say ala michya, and by mistake they said bar nefashis, it's worthless. They still have to make ala michya. Plus they said a bracha in vain. So shahakol, if somebody by mistake took an apple and by mistake made a shahakol, you don't have to make a new bracha. But if somebody made a bar nefashis and a piece of cake, after eating, so then it's not the general bracha that you have to, you'd have to make a new bracha. Okay, that's what we're up to now.
If the situation happened that you don't know a bracha to something, should you say shakol or just put it down and not eat it?
Okay, if somebody doesn't know what the bracha is, should he just not eat it or should he make a shahakol? Right. The answer really is, depends how desperate they are. A very religious person, Hasidic approach, would not eat it. Halachically, you can make if you don't know, you make a bar nefashis. That's it. Unless you call somebody and find out what bracha is something.
Excuse me, if you made a bracha shakol and it's a piece of cake because you forgot it.
Whatever.
So, but what kind of, but you still have to make the bracha?
You still have to make ala michya. Yeah. One thing has nothing to do with the next. Okay, this is where we're up to. Now, the thing that you make a bracha on, whether it's a piece of food or an object of a mitzvah, let's say a lulav and esrig, or whatever it is, any object that you're making a bracha over, or even if you want to smell it, okay, you need to make, before you make the bracha, you need to hold it in your right hand. You have to hold the object when you make a bracha. If you're a left-handed person, you're supposed to hold it in your left hand, because that is your right hand. So before you make a bracha, you want to eat a piece of food. It shouldn't be just on the table in front of you and make a bracha and then take it to eat. That's no good. If you did, b'diavad, you don't have to make another bracha if the food was in front of you. But what happens if somebody was planning to eat an apple and they make a very priya and then they open the refrigerator to take out the apple, that's no good. Because it wasn't in front of you when you made the bracha. Even if you had in mind that you're going to be eating it. But when you eat something or smell something, you have to hold it in your right hand. And again, when you start making a bracha, you're supposed to know what the end of the bracha is. Now you're not supposed to go, Baruch Hashem Elokeinu like, well, what's the ending of the bracha? You're supposed to know, you have to know what the bracha means. You have to know. Now, if somebody didn't hold it, so he said, as long as the object is in front of you, your yaitza, the bracha. What?
If you're holding it on the left hand.
Doesn't matter. But it doesn't matter, because even if you're not holding it, it's in front of you, you're still yaitza. But the proper thing is for a person to hold the object in their hands when they're making a bracha. And by the way, when you teach kids, it's the same thing. You're supposed to teach kids. When you're teaching them how to make brachas, you have to teach them the proper way of making a bracha, which is holding an object in your right hand. Or again, if you're lefty, your left hand.
If your right hand is not clean.
What?
If your right hand is not clean, can you make it with your left hand or you just left hand?
What do you mean it's not clean? You have to go wash it.
It's dusty.
So wash your hand.
You can't say bracha even if your left hand is clean.
You could, talpidin, b'diavad, you can make a bracha on your left hand, but it's not the proper way of doing it. So what do? You wash your hand. If there's no water, you take a cloth and clean, whatever. Okay, what happens if somebody made a bracha, and then the food fell down, and it's not edible? You make a bracha on an apple and it falls down, it falls out of your hand and you pick it up and you eat it. I mean, you have what's called the 5 seconds rule, right? If it's on the floor less than 5 seconds, it's not dirty yet.
30 minutes.
Huh?
30 minutes will be done.
30 minutes.
5 seconds from when you notice. 25 seconds.
Okay. So now, what happens though, if you were drinking, let's say you took a cup of juice, you held it in your hand, you made charcoal, and then it falls out of your hand. Now you can't lick it off the floor, obviously. So now you're going to be taking, so what's the din? With the bracha, what do you do? So the din is, if when you had in mind this cup, you had in mind I'm going to be drinking more than just this cup, and the juice is in front of you, you don't have to make a new bracha. You just take a little more juice and you make the bracha. But what happens if it wasn't in front of you, or you didn't think you're going to be eating anything more? Then you have to make a new bracha when you took the second cup of wine. You have to say Baruch Shem like any bracha l'vatola.
And you didn't have any specific intention, you just pour yourself a cup, but...
No. Bistam, it's only, the Shulchan Aruch says, Bistam, if it's, you had no kavanah, not yes, not no, we assume that the bracha is only on what you have in your hand. And therefore, you have to make a new bracha.
Usually you drink more than 1 cup, so...
Or if you wanted to drink more, yeah, but what happens, simple case over here, what he says, and even in Kitzur. You took out a container of oranges. You poured yourself a cup of juice, yeah? You put the container back in the fridge. Now you make a bracha, and then it falls down. Now, that juice is not in front of you. Okay, it has to be in front of you, and you have to have in mind that you're going to be drinking more. Otherwise, you have to make a new bracha.
What if you have no more juice?
Then you say Baruch Shem Kved Malchus Leil Vaad, and you go to the store and buy more juice.
You drink coffee, and then I'm going to pour for a bit more. You
Huh?
have to make another bracha.
No, it's all part of that cup.
You heard of that before?
What?
Up the creek without a paddle.
Up the creek without a paddle. It's an American expression. Foreigners don't know what it means. Okay, next is like this. You're not supposed to make a separation between the bracha and the eating more than what's called teich kedei dibur. What does it mean, teich kedei dibur? It's a famous argument between the Taz and the Magen Avraham. The Taz holds, what is the definition of teich kedei dibur? The amount of times it takes to say 4 words. Shalom alecha Rabbi Meiri. Amount of time it takes to say 4 words. The Magen Avraham, and that's what Alter Rebbe paskins, the Magen Avraham holds, no, it's not the 4 words, it's 3 words. Shalom alecha Rebbe. This din applies to a lot of mistakes in davening many times. It applies to a lot of dinim in davening also. But what happens if somebody made a bracha? L'chatchila, you're supposed to eat right away. You shouldn't even wait more than it takes the time to say Shalom alecha Rebbe. And also, which is another important din that many people don't know the din, or they know it, they just don't keep it. When you take a bite of a fruit, or a bite of cake, whatever, you're not allowed to talk until you finish that bite. So if you take a bite of an apple, you can't take a bite of an apple and start talking. You're not allowed to talk until you swallow the first bite. So there's an interesting contemporary questions come up. What happens if you put a sucking candy in your mouth? So you make a shahakal on the candy, you put the candy in your mouth, but the candy lasts 5 minutes or whatever. So does it mean you can't talk for 5 minutes? So there are poskim that say, you really shouldn't talk until the first bite. So what they would do is they would bite off a little bit of the candy, when they make the bracha, and then they swallow, and then you go eat the rest of it. But most poskim say that once you swallow the first, that's called the first bite. By a candy, there's no first bite, second bite. So when you swallow a little bit from the candy or whatever it is, so then that's good enough. You could talk.
So that's why they give candy in the shul, so people don't talk.
Yeah, but I've noticed something very interesting. They still talk, which is very unique. because there's another din, you're not allowed to talk while you're eating. So there's a din you're not allowed to talk in a show, period, from beginning of davening to end. You're not allowed to talk when you're eating. But people talk in shul when they're eating. You want to go into, you could say, Ein Isser Chalalissa, you can do a lot of lumdus in it. But the bottom line is, no, there's a din, a lot of people don't know. They take a bite of cake and then they start talking. So you're not allowed to talk until if you did, you don't have to remake the bracha, but you're still not allowed to talk until you eat. Now, even 1 second. What happened if you made a bracha and before you took a bite, you spoke. So if it's things pertaining to the eating, you don't have to repeat the bracha. If it's something not pertaining to the eating, then you have to remake the bracha because there was a separation not pertaining to food between the bracha and the eating. For instance, the example, there's many examples in halacha. Somebody makes hamaitzi on bread and they didn't have salt. So he says, bring the salt. Now bringing the salt is talking, but it's still for the sake of the hamaitzi, to dip the bread into salt. Or he makes a bracha on the fruit and then he realizes he needs to cut the fruit open, check for bugs, worms, whatever. So he says, bring a knife, please. You bring a knife, so then again, that's part of the eating, so you're not allowed to do it, but you don't have to remake the bracha. But if somebody makes a bracha and they say, we won the lottery, then they have to make the bracha again. So therefore he says like this. So there's a dilemma in halacha like this. There's a concept in halacha that we'll learn later. It's preferred to make a bracha on something whole, something complete. That means halachically, if I want to eat an apple, I'm supposed to make a bracha while it's still whole. But now if I make a bracha and then I start cutting the apple, it's going to take time until I eat it. Nevertheless, it's still better to make a bracha when it's whole, okay? And that's not called a break, because you're not talking anyway, you're just waiting a little bit so that's the proper way of doing it.
So question, if you do a motzi on Shabbat, you
Yeah.
have to give bread to everybody.
So again,
Some people that cutting the whole bread and they give to everybody and they eat, it's kind of like long time after.
so again, that waiting, they're not talking, hopefully, they're not talking, and it's all waiting as part of that meal, giving out the challah. But our custom is that by hamaitzi, no, first of all, there's another din. The guy that makes the bracha, it's not necessarily Emily Post etiquette, for those that remember Emily Post, but it's not necessarily considered etiquette. Well, let's say you have 5 people at the table, and you have 1 lechem mishnah, so you're making hamaitzi, right? So then you cut challah, so you have to cut 6 pieces of challah, you and 5 other people. So the halacha says, the guy that makes the bracha and cuts the challah, before he even cuts the rest, he should take a bite. Because he made the bracha, you don't want to have a separation between the bracha and the eating. Then you cut for the other 5 people, you give it out, and then, so there's different customs in Shulchan Aruch or even in Minhagim have different custom, like by wine when you get Kiddush. Does everybody make their own Berei Pri Agafa when they get the little wine?
No.
And the same thing by Challah. Does everybody make their own bracha on Challah or not? So it says if you look at halacha itself, it implies on the wine they should make the bracha and the Challah not. The Minig is the reverse, that on the wine we don't make a bracha unless you talked. If you talk, then you have to make a bracha. And the challah, we do make a bracha. One of the reasons, the challah, you have to cut it, it just takes more time. So you have to make it. What did you want to ask before?
I just
No.
want to say, you answered, because if you put the food in your mouth and then you talk, even before you swallow, it's okay, but you have.
But the other, you don't have to make a new bracha, but you were not allowed to talk.
I was going to ask if you ate a little bit, but it's a halachic, even if you didn't eat a little bit. that's
If you ate a little bit, you took.
okay. For sure it's okay.
In other words, let me rephrase my statement. If somebody has a talking disease,
Like me.
yeah, exactly.
Do you have any medication for me?
Yeah, tape on the mouth. So what happens If a person, I don't want to use a term that we call it, but let's say they have an illness that they must talk, and they make a bracha. So halachically, they should take a tiny bite, finish it, and then they can go back to talking.
That's
The best thing, b'chlal, is not to talk too much. B'chlal, siag lachach mishtika. You know, it's best not to talk too much. Okay. Okay. Okay, done, mate. Machat shin zeh meisem me gebel bei mein kim shlag al teira we gaan naar